Hello everyone, it's the Twins of Destruction here. Today we are going to show you how to make the Zeta beam prop from the sci-fi show Krypton. I had a tin in my garage that was around 5 circles in diameter. I traced that onto a piece of paper. Then I started marking out where the dome would go, and that was about the size of a golf ball plastic container lid. There are varying sizings of plastic containers. Something you also might need but is optional is a little LED. I got mine from the dollar store for, you guessed it, $1. It's actually really bright, and it might just be cheaper to keep replacing the light instead of the batteries. I'm using Foam, which are gym floor mats for this project. I have about 5 layers, and this is because this thing needs to be somewhat bulky, and when you actually sand it, the width will go down, so I wanted it almost bigger than it had to be. When gluing these together, I'm going to actually cut little lines into the foam so the glue can grip. And you also want to make sure that the inside, the textured side, is on the inside, on the top and bottom, so it's just easier to work with. To get a hole into the center, I used a spade bit. This is just to dig out a basic hole to start with dremeling. As you can see here, I am dremeling the biggest hole in the center, and I'm using the plastic container as a reference. And I'm just going at it with a Dremel, and you can also see I'm wearing a respirator that is also very important for a project like this with a bunch of dust particles. And I'm continuing to sand out the center until it is to my liking. Again, I'm going to keep using that plastic container as a reference on the inside and looking at reference pictures on my phone to see if it actually is big enough, and I can also trim the plastic because I felt the plastic was too high. Once you have a good size of both the plastic and enough foam sanded away, you can move on to the next part, which would be making sure the light would fit. So to do this, I drilled a hole into the bottom, through the bottom, and I kept using different size drill bits in increasing size so I can make sure that the light would fit snugly. Moving on to the next part, I drew on the necessary details onto the Zeta beam, using reference pictures from the TV show and just a little bit of guesstimation. To do this, I used a flexible ruler, and I tried my best to wrap it around the sides so I can get a circumference of the circle that I used, because it was different from the beginning because I sanded and added layers and whatnot. So with that knowledge, I evenly spaced lines. Again, if yours is a different size than mine, you won't use the same exact measurements. This is just the route that I went, and I wrapped it all the way around doing that method, so it's pretty even throughout the whole circumference. So I have 4 red lines, and in between each red line I have 2 green lines. Those are the details that I'm actually going to be engraving and carving. To do that, I'm going to be using a wood burner and this X-Acto blade that I have in my hand here. I use the X-Acto blade for the thinner lines, and this is me using a heat gun to make the lines pop out. Moving on to the bottom part, I needed a switch hider, so I'm using Velcro and a piece of foam, and what I'm doing is now sanding down the sides of this piece of foam. This is just thick craft foam. You can use pretty much anything as long as it can sand down. So I'm trying to blend it with the Zeta beam as much as possible. Once you're done sanding, you can make sure it works, and I also carved a hole into the bottom of the foam so I can push the button easier. Back to carving the designs, I used a wood burner on the thicker parts. You gotta be very careful when using a wood burner and be in a well-ventilated area due to the fumes that the foam gives off when burned. After the detailing is done, you have a lot of seams left over from the original gluing. I used craft clay, or art clay, and I filled the seams, and I will link another video on how I did this before down below. Using Plastidip on your foam prop will give it strength and sturdiness when the paint finally goes on. I used about 3 coats, and it is up to you depending on what you feel your prop needs. I'm then going to use a base coat of light orange spray paint as well as orange acrylic paints to get the paint color I need. After you're done painting, I'm going to put in a light coat of black mixed with orange into the cracks so they stick out more. This is the end product in putting the Velcro onto the back of the button. I'm just using simple hot glue. Before we glue the plastic bulb on, I'm using stuffing for pillows and crafts, and I'm using a blue marker and changing the color ever so slightly with it. This will give the light a more bluish color, despite the fact that it is already whitish blue. Depending on the type of light you get, you might need to do this or you might not. Here I'm attempting to spread the stuffing, so when I glue it in, it has an even base all the way around the Zeta beam. And I'm just going to push it in the bottom, and then use hot glue and glue the bulb onto the top. And then after you're done gluing, your Zeta beam prop is done. This is it, everyone. This is the Zeta beam from the sci-fi show Krypton. I really hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you in the next video.